I am 112 years old. I wake up most mornings surprised that I did. That surprise has slowly turned into a kind of quiet shame because I have lived this long and only now understand how badly I misunderstood my own life. I am not telling this because I want sympathy. I am telling it because there is nothing left to protect. Most of the people who mattered to me are gone, and whatever version of myself I was trying to impress has long since disappeared. At this age, time doesn't feel fast anymore. It feels thin, like there isn't much left to hold on to. I sit in a small room now. The walls are bare, except for one photograph that someone else chose to hang. It's of me, younger, standing beside a building I helped pay for. People used to point at that building and say my name with respect. No one points anymore, and no one says my name unless they're checking a chart. That's when it finally became clear to me. I loved the wrong things, and I loved them faithfully. When I was young, love looked like effort. It looked like early mornings and late nights. It looked like being tired and telling myself that tired meant important. I believed that if something cost me enough, it must be worth something. I believed that being needed was the same as being loved. Those ideas stayed with me longer than they should have. In my 20s, I was already serious. I didn't waste time the way others did. I watched people laugh loudly, linger over meals, call their parents for no reason, and I thought they were careless. I had plans, I had lists, I had a sense that life was something you had to earn. I worked in an office with narrow windows and flickering lights. The job wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. People trusted me because I showed up early and left late. At home, there was a woman who learned to eat dinner alone. She never complained. That made it easier for me to stay late again. I told myself I was doing it for us. I told myself I would make it up to her later. Later became a habit. Weekends were for rest, I said. Rest meant catching up on things I hadn't finished. She would sit across from me while I read papers, and sometimes she would start a sentence and stop halfway through. I noticed, I just didn't stop. When our first child was born, I held him carefully, like something borrowed. I loved him, but I loved him quietly. I was afraid that if I leaned too close, something would pull me away from what I was building. I missed small things first words, first steps, little moments that were described to me later, usually while I nodded and checked the time. I told myself memories were flexible. I believed I could catch up. I believed presents could be postponed. Years passed without any single dramatic mistake. That's the part people don't warn you about. Nothing collapsed all at once. It was erosion. Conversations got shorter. Silences got longer. I became someone who was admired at work and tolerated at home. No one said that out loud. They didn't have to. By my 40s, people knew me as dependable. That word followed me everywhere. It sounded good, but it felt heavy. I was dependable because I rarely said no. I was dependable because I didn't ask for much. I was dependable because I had learned to replace desire with duty. At home, my children learned not to interrupt. They learned that affection came scheduled. They learned to be proud of me from a distance. I told myself this was maturity. I told myself this was sacrifice. I didn't notice how quiet the house had become. When my wife stopped waiting up for me, I felt relieved. I didn't have to explain myself anymore. That relief should have frightened me. There was a night I came home late and found her asleep on the couch, fully dressed. The television was still on. I stood there for a long time and felt like a visitor. I went to bed without waking her. I had an early meeting.
By the time I realized something was wrong, it had already settled into the walls. We spoke politely, we planned efficiently. Love became logistics, and I was very good at logistics. I don't remember the exact moment when she stopped telling me her thoughts. I only remember realizing one day that I didn't know them anymore. I knew her schedule, I knew her preferences. I did not know her. My children grew up and moved away. They called on holidays. I called it independence. Work rewarded me. Promotions, plaques, a retirement party where people spoke about my dedication. I stood there smiling, holding a small glass, listening to words that felt strangely hollow. Someone thanked me for my years of service. I nodded and felt an ache I couldn't name. After retirement, the days opened up in a way I wasn't prepared for. I had spent decades wishing for time. When it arrived, I didn't know how to live inside it. My wife and I sat across from each other more often. Without work between us, the silence felt exposed. We talked about groceries and weather. She died quietly one winter morning. No argument, no resolution. I held her hand and realized how unfamiliar it felt. That was when the truth began to settle in. I had loved the image of responsibility more than the people it was supposed to protect. I had loved being needed by systems that would replace me without hesitation. I had loved the idea of later so much that I never lived now. These realizations did not come with fireworks. They came with emptiness, with long afternoons and unanswered questions. I am 112 now. Most of the world I knew is gone. People speak to me slowly. They ask the same questions. They assume I am full of wisdom. I am full of memory. That is not the same thing. If you are listening to this, I am not asking you to change your life. I am only telling you what it felt like to reach the end and understand, finally, what I loved. I loved being useful more than being present. I loved being respected more than being known. And I learned too late that love, when aimed at the wrong things, still costs everything. This is only the beginning of what I need to say. I am still here. That fact alone feels heavy some days. After my wife died, people told me I was strong. I didn't correct them. Strength sounded better than confusion. The house felt larger without her, even though nothing had changed. Same furniture, same clock ticking in the hallway. But the air was different. There was no one to notice when I came into a room. No one to ask how my day had been, not because they needed an answer, but because they wanted one. I tried to stay busy. Old habits don't leave easily. I organized drawers that didn't need organizing. I reread documents from jobs that no longer existed. I kept telling myself I was keeping my mind sharp. Really, I was avoiding stillness. Stillness has a way of bringing things back, moments you skipped, words you meant to say and never did. I thought about the nights she waited up for me, how she would look up when I came in, even if it was late, how she eventually stopped looking. That wasn't a single decision she made. It was a slow adjustment, the kind people make when they realize something won't change. I wish I could say I noticed right away. I didn't. I was proud of how smoothly my life ran. My children visited less often as the years went on. They had their own lives, their own responsibilities. I understood that. When they did come, the visits felt polite. They asked about my health. They told me about work. There was affection, but it felt careful, like something that could be damaged if handled too roughly. I realized I had taught them that. I had taught them that love comes with conditions, with schedules, with acceptable times and places. I didn't mean to. Intentions don't matter much when time has passed. There was a moment, years after my wife's death, when one of my children asked me a simple question. They asked me if I had been happy. I didn't know how to answer. The silence stretched longer than it should have. I spoke about stability, about providing, about doing what needed to be done. They nodded politely. I could see in their eyes that it wasn't the answer they were asking for. After they left, I sat alone and tried to remember the last time I had felt joy without purpose attached to it. Not pride, not relief, joy. The memory did not come easily. That frightened me more than anything else. People think regret is loud. It isn't. It's quiet and repetitive. It shows up when there's nothing left to distract you.
With age, people fade quietly. You're remembered in records, not in warmth. I believed achievement mattered. It doesn't. Presence does. Time reaches a point where nothing can be fixed. You can't return to moments you missed. Notice what your time truly loves. Listen longer. Be present. I thought there would always be more time. There wasn't. I am 112 years old. This is what I learned when time was almost gone.